All right. A student texted me today to say, "Oh, I'm not sure how to do the case presentation Excel spreadsheet." So I'll go through it one more time quickly. First thing I do is make sure that as I'm setting it up, I kind of slap this together with the idea that students would modify it. All right. So I went up and I grabbed. Anyway, I made the words fit. All right. In this case, we have 100 points. So we've got to modify that 75 right off the bat. In a way, and then you have to hopefully remember how to drag and get things the same in Excel. Luckily, we've got fundraisers calling us at all hours of the day, but my wife decided that we don't use our phone much, so let's just turn it into a fax machine. Anyway, so I changed that project points available to percentage to 100%. And when you're dealing with percentages, the thing you want to do is make the whole column percentage, and you go over in this number area. Hopefully you can follow my cursor. You click percentage. You don't really need to do this because we're dealing in round percent, but I like to increase it so that we've got 2%, 2 decimal points. That's just kind of a conceit of mine. And each student should get 10%. If you get, St. Louis Community College, we may not get 4 graders for everything. We're going to try to, but we'll work on that. I would say go ahead and use 4 graders because you should get at least 3, and then we'll do an average of the 3 to get our 4th if we don't get 4 graders. So I've just made everybody, I put everybody in terms of what percentage they get. Then points awarded, we'll just say that you got a 39 from me. That tends to be a little bit low on my average, about a 39.2 to 39.7, 40, give or take. It's pretty rare I go below that, 37 periodically, because I grade between 5 and 6 and use decimal points. So let's just say some students are fairly close to me. They somewhat agree. But here are your totals. When they report back to you, these are your totals. I'm just going to, and then the last person, kind of like me, had a bad hair day, and they decided, oh, I'm going to really teach this person a lesson. You were awful. I'm going to teach you something. All right. We don't have to listen to that person. They've got an issue. I'm sorry for this jumping around, and it won't display well. There we go. We're going to go into the auto sum area, and we're just going to take an average. And notice Excel defaults to the 3 cells above. No, goodness, I thought I did it right. I didn't. Oh, I deleted. All right, so that gives me 39.66. Here, I ought to add a comment and explain that given a 23 by student X. Now, some of you may have students assigned to grade you who did not grade you. I need, in those cases, for you to tell me what student didn't grade you, because part of this assignment is that everybody does their grading. I should have put this on a timer so I know what I'm doing. And I'm just going to say took average score, and then all that does is explain to me what I did. I'll see the little comment there when I cursor over the cell. It tells me exactly what happened. All right, now we're ready for the formula, and this is really how simple this is. We're going to say equals, it's total points, times percentage of grade, times points awarded, and then divided by total points available. If you aren't real sure this will work right, go ahead and put parentheses around the first three, but I think you can see it works fine, at least in this version of Excel. So we're going to drag that down to the operative words. We're going to delete it out of the one we need. That's not going to give us, then we need to take an auto sum that defaults, but it doesn't include the professor score. So we do this. You come over here. I've already set up, I'm going to click Save As, and you should save it as chapter like this, and then add your additionals, X, Y, whatever else you want to add, and then save it, and you submit this in your PowerPoint slides. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about today is let's look at the project on the last Clark versus MKT, the CN, AofR, and FSR. All right, what is this? Now, I'm using Canvas in UMSL, similar appearance, same language in the community colleges. I'm not going to go ahead and show you that. You've got the same language. All right, so CN is contributory negligence. Assumption of the risk is AofR, and the fellow servant rule, to the best you can, discover what, and I'm not looking for deep ideas here necessarily. Well, I'm looking for as good as you can. I don't need high-end statements of what the law was, but I do need to see all of the elements of the doctrine. That is, everything which must be proven to have the doctrine apply under the law. Then for each element, I want you to examine what the plaintiff put in to defeat the defense, okay? Plaintiff saying railroad negligent, railroad saying, yeah, that may be true, but he's more, he's negligent. Under the old days, contributory negligence, if plaintiff was a little bit at fault, he got nothing, zip, nada. If he assumed the risk, if he knew the risk, understood the risk, and voluntarily accepted the risk, or voluntarily encountered the risk, and notice it's and. You have to prove all the elements. If Clark's able to bust one of those, it goes away. The last one is really the fellow servant rule. You may or may not struggle there to find the actual document, to find the doctrine itself. But the general understanding, and if you want to take a shortcut now, go ahead, is that if your injuries as a worker were caused by a coworker, you cannot recover from the employer unless that worker was working absolutely following directly the directions of the employer. If that worker is working completely without negligence, in other words, you can recover against the employer. If it is the fault of the fellow employee's negligence is why you got hurt, you get to recover from your co-employee. Fabulous outcome. Wouldn't you all agree? You'd much rather sue a student to get money than the professor or the school. The difference is the school has money, the professors tend to have money. Most of your fellow students can barely afford lunch, So great, I got a judgment, but I've got nothing to collect against. All right, so here's what I want to see each time. So what I've done is I took and I kind of said, at least for me, I'd rather you do a heading like this, contributory negligence. Give me an introductory paragraph, but essentially what I want to see you do in paragraph format and not necessarily in a strict outline format. But let's talk about it a little bit. You could put the elements in a numbered paragraph format or in a bulleted format. We could switch over to bullet points. I don't want that there. you could say the elements of contributory negligence are colon, then come down, have a little open space, and then just bullet point them or number them. And the key word is, does it say this, this, and that, and this, or this, and this or that? Those are different. This or that means if I prove either of the latter two and all of the first three, I'm okay. I've proven it all. All right. So as I look at this case, I think plaintiff actually introduced evidence to carefully defeat at least contributory negligence and assumption of the risk. The railroad at the time did not use fellow servant rule. I'm not certain why. I think it probably would have seemed pretty mean in front of a jury. Juries may have kind of been nullifying that doctrine, and they may well have had an idea that no jury's going to give Jim Hausman, they're not going to give Clark a verdict against Jim Hausman. They realize there's no money there. They're going to go walk around that. The reason I think Jim Hausman was at fault here is that he may have gotten too close to that steer. And if you look at the mock trial training, if you get behind these things, it's like a horse. You get in the back of it, it's going to react. Horses kick backwards. Big animal like this may turn around and just try to push you out of the way. And for this horse, it's either that or it's a combination of Jim getting too close and the bridge being kind of an open girder framework, so it couldn't walk across the bridge. Not sure how it got across in the first place, because that creek's, it's a pretty steep drop down and up. But for a cow, that may not be a big deal. It may have gone through the water, because he found it over in a field, and it may have been at a less of a ravine, so that it didn't go through the bridge this time, but it got up onto the track and was walking that way, and then all of a sudden it encounters the bridge. It's very similar to the deer gates at the Arboretum, which are basically a bunch of steel bars spaced kind of boom, 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 and the deer will get their hooves between the bars. They can't go through. So they can leave a gate open, and the deer that wander around won't leave the part of the Arboretum they want to keep them in and go into the part where, there's a whole bunch of yummy hostas and other stuff. Anyway, all right, so backing up, what you need to do, I think, is try to write this in paragraph format, and you don't have to be dogmatic, if you will, that I've covered plaintiff's evidence here. There are ways you could come up with ways to make this work better, but at least as I'm looking at it, a student sent me one, and he did elements, and he did contributory negligence, then AofR, then FSR. Then he went to plaintiff's evidence, and he did contributory negligence, AofR, FSR. I struggled to follow that. It would be easier for me, and this is one of the things you need to do as an author, is make it easy on your audience or make it appealing to your audience. It would be easier for me if you cover each of these, and then a lot of the evidence flows over. Contributory negligence, was there a duty? Was there a breach of the duty? Did it result in an injury? Did those injuries lead to damages? Those tend to be the elements, all right? And if you look at this, you're going to see that there's only certain parts of it that really plaintiff had to prove. And, what did he do to defeat the defense? He claims the railroad had a duty. What did it do to bust it? Then I want to see what you think the defendant proved in terms of whether Clark asserted was guilty of this. Did they meet their burden of proof? Did Clark defeat it? Did the defendant meet the burden? And then the last thing is, should the court have given this to the jury? Let me make a little editorial aside about that. Ordinarily, judges submit everything to the jury unless it's absolutely, completely plain there was no evidence on that point. All they're doing is inviting appeal. If they give it to the jury and the jury finds, hey, they didn't have evidence of element C, therefore, we find defendant not guilty or plaintiff not guilty of contributory negligence, um, court's done. Court gave it to a jury. Jury decided this is how it is. Let it go. Um, at the same time, if Clark, I want to see your idea. Let me make one more comment, maybe out of line, but when I ask for your opinion, I'm really in many ways asking more for your conclusion. A lot of us think that saying things like, I believe, is sufficient. What we need to say is, I conclude that. To me, that's more powerful. I believe is, somewhat weak in some people's minds. It gets us into, I believe in a higher power kind of thinking. I may be there and I fully support that for you, but I want to know why you came to that conclusion. Sometimes we just think, in my opinion, this is how it should be, period. We're done. We don't have to explain why I came to that conclusion, why I hold that opinion. Well, in academic writing and college writing particularly on the law, we absolutely have to support our reasoning. So, basically, you could take this elements thing, and if you think this would work for you, you just copy it, and then, of course, paste it in, do the same thing, and just make sure you've done this. In each of these, FSR is a little bit fuzzier, but, and then look, have I got all of this in there? Have I done all of that? I mean, basically, all I'm going to do here, I don't intend to do heavy checks on grammar and rebuilding your sentences. The feedback may be a lot less because I've got a lot shorter time frame. We're near the end of the semester. I've got to start playing the roles of all these witnesses. My time's getting a little more compressed. I'm going to check, did you do what I asked for? And assign points to that. So anyway, I hope this helped, and I'll talk with you all soon. Take care. Bye.